Hello everyone, welcome to yet another video in this, the clown decade. The decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And in today's episode we are going through how things have got so bad that people actually forgot what the good times were like. Yes, for those of you who didn't see my 2-hour gargantuan video yesterday, and trust me, I don't blame you, 2 hours is a lot of time to put in to listen to something. I went through the controversy of Starfield, specifically with the spat between Az and the Actman, and if you want a quick summary of that 2 hours, it is Az is basically right, and I reckon Actman would agree with him if he didn't strawman him for the 2-hour stream I went through. But I thought I'd expand on this topic, because it wasn't just Actman who was having a go at Az, it was a lot of people who, just a few years ago, you would have assumed was on his side. And a lot of this controversy is revolved around this tweet by the talented artist George Alexopoulos, where in relation to this story, he says, interesting how many YouTubers on our side during Gamergate turn out to be leftist Trojan horses. And I have to admit that I completely agree with him. There are some people who were big actors in the anti-SJW side of the Gamergate debate who are completely accepting of SJWism in games now. And they're trotting out similar arguments to Actman's pretty weak arguments from the video yesterday, where he's saying, oh, who cares, it barely affects the game at all. You're just doing what Anita did, you're putting your own ideology in, when in reality this is all a reaction to the ideology being put into the game, whether it makes sense or not. Either way is bad. And if you're on the side of apathy when it comes to ideology, as far as I'm concerned, you're on the side of the ideology. You are fine with it being normalised. And the whole point of channel like mine and others like the Lotus Eaters is to stop this type of normalisation. Or at the very least, criticise it, which is what we are doing, and what Az was doing. So in reply to this tweet, the biggest anti-SJW account from the Gamergate era had to be Shoe on Head, and she was trying to make this point, that Gamergate wasn't entirely some right-wing movement, and it's some SJW-esque history revisionism to think it was so, and has a post from 2014 with political compass tests from people who were anti-SJW. And as you can see, it is very much leaning to the libertarian left. The thing is that he's not saying it wasn't a left-wing push at all. He is saying that there were leftist Trojan horses, which is a different thing. Because people like Shu would describe SJWism as leftist. The problem is that she is actively a leftist. She is one of the Bernie bros, and if you are a Bernie bro, you do want fully fledged socialism, and Shu is open about that. The problem is that a lot of SJW presuppositions are rooted in socialism. You know, half, if not more than half, of the whole ideas of social justice is Marxist. And if people say they're a socialist these days, what they mean is that they are a soft-core Marxist. Whether she realises it or not, I don't think she does. I think she just wants all these things that sound nice and doesn't really go beyond it. That's why a lot of people support Bernie. However, this is not where Shoe on Head stopped. She also made this quote tweet. Interesting how people are now rewriting history from the lenses of lib journalists they hated. Pretending Gamergate was some movement full of conservative is goofy as shiv to anyone who was actually around back then. Again, he's not saying it was a conservative movement. He doesn't necessarily think you should be a conservative. What he is saying is that if you are accepting this SJW stuff as normal or acceptable, you are an SJW. They have normalised it, and we all thought the whole point of you making all these videos was that you don't want to normalise it and you want it out of everything. It turned out you were just whinging about Anita, and not liking the fact that she was calling you names. No, Chris Ray-Gun wasn't on your side. Well, he was, because they were both arguing against Anita, just because he thought SJWs were cringe and did a terrible job at representing his values. Yeah, this is the problem, though. They are representing his values. That is the problem. But the way he was talking, everyone thought that they weren't his values. His values differed from, we need more black people in video games, we need more strong women in movies. It turns out what his problem was that there is terrible writing, but he didn't join up that everything is getting worse in the media and in games and all that because of these values that were being pushed. But apparently they are his values, as we will get into later. Believe it or not, some people who claimed to be left-wing back then were in fact left-wing. Yes, we all believe that. Most people were. It's amazing how back then it was so normal and common to be a left-winger who criticises the left, But now everyone is so direction brain poisoned. People who have stayed relatively the same, like TJ, aka the Amazing Atheist, and Chris, are seen as traitors to an alliance they never agreed to. More importantly, it was a decade ago. I mean, I'm not going to lie, with the way the Amazing Atheist started acting when he started becoming unpopular, I have to say I'm very glad I'm on the opposite side to him. But the thing with Az's rant is that it was criticising things that Shoe on Head, Chris Raygun, and probably TJ would have complained about back in 2014 to 2016. They will have been against it because Anita Sarkeesian is in favour of it. The thing is now is that Anita Sarkeesian isn't at the forefront of all this. In fact, basically no one is, because they realised they can be a lot more effective in the background making these changes and consulting on these changes. And there are plenty of people who want to remain anonymous but feed in information to people like the Quartering and other media YouTubers, saying that this is exactly what's happening. Behind the scenes, what they believe to be awful things to put into games, films and TV shows is being put in anyway. Because the people in charge are listening more to the Anita Sarkeesians of the world than the people who actually care about making good art. But you don't care about that as long as you're not being called racist. And since he has been the subject of Shoe's tweets, we should get into what Chris Raygun has to say about this whole thing. So, in replying to George again, Chris says, interesting that YouTubers who constantly said I'm left-wing in their critique videos of other left-leaning people end up being left-leaning. What a wild event. Yes, but again, Chris, there is a big difference between a leftist and a left-winger. To put it simply, a leftist is woke, a left-winger is not woke, and both want some sort of egalitarian policies. Leftists will look at having egalitarian policies between races, between sexes, between sexual orientations, whereas just your bog-standard left-winger will mainly just be looking at economic equality. They will be social democratic types. They will be ones who want more of a welfare state than someone like me, let's say, who's a bit more right-leaning. And they are people that you can have normal conversations with because you are actually trying to find solutions with actual problems in the country. Leftists will make up problems in the country and then do their best to make even worse problems for people that they hate. And again, the pronouns are a very thin end of the wedge for that. However, again, as I mentioned a lot in the last video, it was a straw that broke the camel's back because we are seeing thousands upon thousands of straws being put on an already dead camel's back because so many people are fed up with it. But as you can see, Carl Benjamin replied, saying, why do you oppose SJWs at all, Chris? You are claiming them as your tribe and now you're openly defending them. Did you not know where leftism was going and it took you a while to get comfortable with it? And that's a fair point to make. Chris Raygun has openly said, yeah, I'm on their team. That's a big problem because leftism does try and undermine basically all of society's norms, everything that makes our countries functional. They want a complete revolution of how things work, and all in all, things may be bad, but they're not that bad. Most of our problems have come from these revolutionary acts from leftists. That's not to say that the right wing don't cause problems of their own, don't get me wrong. I am definitely saying, though, that in the 4 years that Donald Trump was in power in America, you really didn't meaningfully see that much change. And when it comes to the UK and the right wing here and the Conservatives, they are more left-wing than Labour were 5 years ago. And that's when Corbyn was in charge, for God's sake. So Chris answers this question by saying, it's very telling to me that you see no valid reason to call people out for stupid behaviour if they happen to vote similarly to you on policy issues. To which I had to pipe up and say, well, that's not what he's saying. He's saying that after all this time, all you were criticising was their behaviour and not their ideas. So this is why people were confused, because the behaviour was just insulting, but their ideas were actually evil. And in some of your past videos, you never use the word evil, but you do imply it quite a lot. So this is why people think that you are directly in opposition to their ideas and values, because you'd imply it. And not only that, but it was very focused on the left wing. You would genuinely almost never criticise the right wing, but I suppose that's because you specifically covered gaming, and the right wing really didn't have that much to do to criticise gaming, apart from every now and then you'd say, oh, they think video games cause violence, and that's about it. But that's an argument they lost in the 90s. Chris then goes on to say, how is it confusing when I was literally telling you the whole time that the behaviour was the target of my mockery? This is from 5 years ago. People being upset with me because they interpret media at a third grade level is just so funny to me because I was straight up telling you. And then here is the clip that he sent me. I'm going to play it in full because you need the full context.
Go online. Here's the thing about it. If you're not going to put effort into writing the rhymes, if you're not going to put effort into writing the lyrics, if you're not going to put effort into the production, if you're not going to put effort into making it something that's not horrible to listen to, don't make it. Don't make it. Because no one's looking at, no child is looking at this and like being convinced by it. It's a rap. Stop trying to be hip and cool to teach people social justice. Stop it. There are far better ways to get your point across, and horrendously written rap is not one of them.
And to be absolutely fair to Chris, he's right. He was telling us. At no point in that clip does he say, don't do these things about social justice because social justice leads to completely evil outcomes. He was actually saying here, in the subtext at the very least in this particular clip, I agree with social justice presuppositions. I agree with pretty much all of it. Just don't make things cringe. And obviously, to expand upon that, don't insult me for being against this, blah, 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 blah. But this is the thing. When people said, oh, so you're against social justice, then Chris would generally say, yeah, absolutely, I'm against social justice warriors, and generally he'd say he's against the things that they want. However, apparently you give it 5 years, and they stop coming after your video games, or at least explicitly coming after your video games, and Chris is absolutely fine with it. In fact, he will actively go after people who are fed up of SJW stuff in their games, TV shows and movies, and effectively say that they are the same as Anita Sarkeesian, despite the fact that no one's actually insulting Chris. Like, no one's insulted Chris in any of these tweets. Or no one major anyway, or certainly no one bigger than me. And if we are insulting you, we are certainly not making accusations about your character. We're not calling you any ists or claiming that you have any phobias. At most we are calling you deceitful, and at least we are calling you an idiot. But then there was another tweet that caused quite a bit of a stir, and that comes from Harry from the Lotus Eaters, and I think he had one of the best single tweets in this whole episode. And here's what it said. So the Starfield discourse has revealed the rift between the old anti-SJW crowd, those with actual political instincts and foresight, and those who would have happily agreed with Anita if she had just been less smug about it. And if Chris's clip that he sent me is anything to go by, that is absolutely correct. His issue was the cringe and the insults. He had no issue with the values that they were espousing, despite the fact that they are demonstrably evil. And since we're on the topic of Chris, we may as well go with his tweet in reply to this. Starfield discourse has revealed a rift between those who live in a terminally online hellscape, where a 3-second long character customization option in a new video game sends them spiralling into a fit of Vietnam flashback PSDs, and those who are functioning adults. I mean, as explained yesterday, part of Az's whole shtick is that he will go over the top and off the rails on his rants. And also, as explained yesterday, it's a straw that broke the camel's back. That this is everywhere. This stuff that we all thought you were against, Chris, and that you didn't want in video games and movies, it's in all of them. It's in absolutely all of them. Obviously, there are rare exceptions to that, but overall, when people are seeing it in almost everything that they enjoy, that they used to enjoy, in IPs that they used to find very entertaining as children and see as part of their identity, yeah, I think it's actually quite understandable to be very angry about the fact that it has been infested with people whose ideas are evil. And the thing is that it's not just in movies and TV shows, it's everywhere in real life. I say this all the time. I mean, I used to live in Manchester, I don't anymore, but it was very difficult to go through Manchester at any point during the year, not just in Pride months, and not see a rainbow flag somewhere, not see a trans pride flag somewhere, not see some sort of ridiculous protest or people handing out flyers saying, oh look, why don't we give to this social justice movement? It's just become that normalised. And the whole point of Gamergate was, we're not going to normalise this in games, please go away. And the fact is that you lost, but now they're not being mean to you anymore, so you're just accepting it. And that is truly pathetic, I'm afraid. But don't worry, Chris, it's not just you. One of the founders of Kekistan himself, Jeff Holiday, also chimed in. I was going to ask who this tone-deaf dork who literally read some black guy's tweets backwards was, then I realised it's one of those weird twinks Carl pays to be on the Incel podcast Misogyny Frequency. And this just plays right into the idiot argument handbook of, oh, this is just horseshoe theory, you are exactly like Anita Sarkeesian actually, because you are criticising things in video games. Which is a really stupid thing to say, obviously. Because Anita's whole thing was, I want these things out of video games, and I want these particular aspects in it because social justice, because my ideology. Whereas everyone else who is against that sort of thing As we can see, they come from all different walks of life, as Gamergate was. These people are just saying, I want this social justice stuff out of all my films and games, either because I think it's completely evil, like I would say, or as a lot more people would say, it's because it's making it completely terrible, because they are putting the agenda before the writing. And that is actually impossible to do with any sort of social justice, because social justice is anti-reality. And I know I've been saying social justice a lot this video. Obviously, it just means postmodern neo-Marxism, or wokery, or current day, as was saying in the last video, or as the most common term for it is, intersectionality. Anyway, the last X-based YouTuber who we are going to go through quickly is Some Black Guy, who, in replying to a tweet pointing out that the pronouns picker is simply normalising the social justice idea that people can pick their own pronouns, Some Black Guy says, if someone isn't an asshole, I respect them enough to call them whatever they want within reason. So this is the thing, you don't believe in the pronouns picker. There is no sleight of hand going on, it's just a tiny feature in a game. Again, if it's so tiny and so inconsequential, why did they see a need to put it in? As this guy says, it is to normalise it. Being terminally online has made you a paranoid freak, because this shit ain't that serious, go outside. No, it is serious. It's all over LinkedIn. In a bunch of corporations now, they are asking you to put your pronouns in your email signature. This is normalised. It is at the point where it is everywhere. It's not just online. It's not just in video games. It's not something that doesn't matter. It's everywhere. You know, there are people who have gone to meetings at work and the first thing they say is introduce yourself and state your pronouns. Do you not see an issue with this? Do you not think this is really weird? Do you not think it's strange that for literally centuries, no one had a problem with pronouns whatsoever? They understood if you're a man, you're a he. If you're a woman, you are a she. And if you don't know who some third person is, you go with they. And for some reason, people think you can not only choose your own pronouns, which is already weird enough, but they are literally making their own up. Because they have so little of their own identity that they can project to the world, they have to scrape with anything they can to tell other people, you have to do this for me, otherwise you are an evil person. You are completely apathetic to this normalisation process. And the whole point of Gamergate was that we weren't going to normalise social justice, because the people who were pushing it, obviously they were cringe at the very best, but they were evil at worse. Hence the doxing, hence it's evolved into cancel culture where people are literally losing their bank accounts because of their own personal opinions. This is just a straw on top of all these problems, and you are doing your best to try and ignore it while you are calling everyone who points out the problem cringe, because he happened to do it for something that is admittedly quite inconsequential. But if it was that inconsequential, why is it in the game? Anyway, since Gamergate was mostly revolving around Anita Sarkeesian being the social justice prime, let's see where her work has gotten her. Your diversity, equality and inclusion initiatives are making your culture worse. Hosted by Anita Sarkeesian. She's still about. She is still consulting with game developers. She is still in the mix. She is still causing problems. But the thing is that you don't care. You don't care because she is not there front and centre saying that you are a bigot, you are racist, you are sexist, you are whatever. She is in the background now in these shadowy little exclusive conferences. Because this is at the Game Developers Conference, which is supposed to be a professional networking event where you can learn more about game design and future technologies and things like that. Why do diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives matter? You are trying to make art. And Anita is trying to get you to push propaganda. This is obviously a problem. Let's not pretend that we won Gamergate. The push to create more inclusive workplaces is an admirable one, but is failing because the real challenging and messy work is not being allowed to actually happen. Those who have accumulated the most power, executive or parent companies, have weaponized legal departments, ERGs, EAPs, among other tools, even co-opting the language of grassroots advocates to neuter the work of culture change and render it largely inefficient. In other words, the social justice crap that we are seeing everywhere in the professional world, whether it be pronouns in your work signature or affirmative action in hiring practices, it's apparently not enough. Because it's never going to be enough. This was the whole point James Lindsay had at the Oxford debate. It can never go far enough because there are no stated aims in the ideology. All it thinks is if there is an oppressor class, whether it be historical or present, it needs to be crushed. And the thing is that you are never going to get rid of oppressor or oppressed classes if you're a Marxist, because there is never going to be equality. Ever. And if Marxists are honest with themselves, what they actually want is the proletariat on top. And obviously with everyone else using Marxism in their post-modern analysis when it comes to this sort of thing, they want everyone who isn't a straight white male on top. This is where the progressive stack comes from. Their theory behind that, they just want it turned upside down. Can we agree that that is bad Chris Ray Gun, some black guy, Jeff Holiday and Shoe on Head? Because if you agree with that, you agree with us. And part of the description of the Game Developers Conference says this: there's a big difference between we want to be welcoming and we have not been welcoming to women, BIPOC, trans, queer, disabled folks. Here's how we are going to make that right, she noted, that being Anita Sarkeesian. That shift is an active stance and acknowledgement of past failings, put the focus more on the impact on those who were affected rather than the intentions of the privilege, she said. Such an active acknowledgement of wrongdoing is a first step towards righting the situation, but is often missing when companies address harms. You can't say sorry without naming what you did wrong, Sarkeesian said. You can't make things better while pretending nothing is wrong. So you idiots, all of you saying that Az is on the wrong here, this isn't what Az is saying at all. This is no part of his character or ideology. He is not saying anyone has done anything wrong to the point they need to apologise for absolutely everything. He is just saying people like Anita Sarkeesian need to be kicked out of the gaming industry because they are actively making things worse. From a business perspective, her ideas are costing you money, costing you business, costing you your fan base and customers. From a consumer perspective, they are adding pointless and apparently completely inconsequential parts of the game that are causing people to lose their immersion. The strong woman trope is becoming more and more common than ever, and it's just getting to a point where it's getting so boring that we can literally see the 2D cutouts before the developers even tell us about them. And they are so obviously pushing their agenda on us that it's just wearing us all out. This is clearly a problem. This is clearly making the whole situation worse. You can call us online nerds all you want. The thing is that this is just one small part, one section of where they've taken over, because it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So let's take a look at this classic picture from when it came out that Chris Ray Gun and Lacey Green started dating, and a lot of the leftists went absolutely nuts. The social justice side thought that they had lost an important asset, and obviously the anti-SJWs thought that they had gained one. We thought we'd won. We thought this is the start. They're slowly all going to come round to our side because we are on the correct side, for lack of a better term. We are not anti-reality. We are not evil. We are the classically liberal types that just want people to be left alone and for people to be able to make the art they want. Obviously, this problem went much deeper, and some of the people on the left-hand side here read a bit deeper and found that out. But an awful lot of them went cringe. Of the people I recognise here, obviously, Mundane Matt, Chris Ray Gun, Shoe on Head. I'm sure there are others that I don't recognise in that picture. They've all gone cringe. They've all taken leave me alone a bit too far and are just saying, as long as you're not insulting me, you can do what you want with your art. I don't really care for the quality at all, or I do insofar as make it somewhat entertaining, but they have unironically turned into the part of the corporate machine. Just, do I enjoy it or not? Yeah, no, I'm not going to think any deeper than that. That's where they're up to now. They are complete apologists for all the people on the right, because the people on the right, they've effectively got their world. We don't really control anything. I mean, I was listening to the Lotus Eaters talk about this whole escapade before, and they know people and have contacts with people within the industry that say, look, we don't want to make all this, but if we want to keep our jobs, we have to. We don't get a say or too much artistic, creative independence when it comes to the things we want to make. We need to put these strong woman characters in. We need to make all these trans people and put them in the shows, especially because it makes no sense, because the ideology that they are trying to push makes no sense. But then, for the people that didn't turn cringe, they are either off the radar or they looked further into all the problems and actually are making incredibly good content against it. Like, for example, Vernaculus, he's one that's just kind of off the radar. He's writing fiction at the moment, I believe. He's still on Twitter, but he doesn't really talk too much about politics anymore, so he's fine as far as I can tell. Sargon of Akkad, obviously Carl Benjamin, he's doing good stuff with the Lotus Eaters, made an entire media empire almost, or a small company anyway. Making podcasts, I listen to a fair few of them. I've not really been doing it recently, but from the recent stuff I've heard, he's still making good things. He's still very much worth listening to, and the reason for that is that he really did read into all the problems. When it comes to Blair White, she is obviously focusing on the trans debate, given that she herself is a trans person, and tends to be against, obviously, the most ridiculous parts of it, which is all fine. Of course she read more into that. She is literally the type of person that would have to read into that. But I've left this last one because I thought he'd just gone off the radar, but it turns out I'm actually quite wrong about that. The last one is Armored Skeptic. If you thought Armored Skeptic's channel just went off the deep end after he criticised Jordan Peterson by completely misunderstanding his arguments in a video he made a few years ago, he's kind of turned his channel around. His last few videos, which have been looking into history and just talking about a subject he loves, is pretty good, but it is his last two videos, they have actually been on par with things that Lotus Eaters are saying. His Hollywood is Evil and There Goes My Hero videos, they are directly addressing this problem. They are addressing the problem of Hollywood is actually evil and wants all of our normative claims and for normal societal myths to be completely undermined. He goes into the example of The Incredibles, saying that the first Incredibles film was very pro-family and about how it's important, and in the second film they try their best to completely subvert that. So Armored Skeptic, he seems to have gone for a couple of years, read up on all this stuff, talked to people in the industry and gone, oh, yeah, these things that I was talking about a few years ago, it's got way worse. Like, honestly, I'd give Armored Skeptic a subscribe again, and honestly, watch his videos. They're pretty good. I was actually surprised. I thought I'd say, oh, Armored Skeptic, you know, he broke up with Shoe on Head and just went off the radar and the rails a bit after that. But no, he seems to have come back and got his passion back. I'd honestly give him a look, give him a watch, subscribe to him, and really give him some support, because he's doing good stuff. I reckon we'll genuinely see a comeback with Armored Skeptic, and I really hope we do, because I did enjoy his old videos. But that's pretty much it for everyone on that picture. A lot of them have really disappointed us in the last couple of days, because they've turned into the very thing we hate. You know, you either die a hero or live longer enough to see yourself become the villain. Although apparently in Armored Skeptic's case, it is very much a redemption arc. And I'm all here for it. I'm definitely going to look out for his videos. So to quickly conclude, that clip of Az, he didn't do anything wrong. He played into the character he does on his channel of going over the top, raging at anything he is passionate about, whether it's the game he's playing or the politics he wants to talk about within films or the themes or whatever he's passionate about. That was fine. His rant, nothing wrong with it. He just took aim at Starfield because it happened to be the game he was playing at the time. It could have been anything. It could have been Doctor Who. It could have been the new Witcher series. It could have been anything. It just happened to be Starfield, and people then took that as oh, he's crying over pronoun pickers in games, when really what he's crying about, if you really want to phrase it that way, is just he is watching everything he loves crumble. He is watching the quality be destroyed by the exact type of thing that Gamergate was all about. It started off as some idiots in some forums say that all gamers are sexist and racist. Anita Sarkeesian took advantage of that, tried to push her agenda into everything that she could, and she ended up doing that. And despite the fact that Gamergate was supposed to be about that, a lot of people pushing Gamergate, turns out they actually agreed with her. They just wanted her to not be insulting to them. And that's the unfortunate reality. We are looking back at the battlefield and saying, oh, we were apparently fighting for something completely different. We were happy allies at the time, and at this point, apparently you are just so apathetic you don't care that they've actually won. You fought against them, and you're just happy that they are no longer calling you racist. That's all you're happy about. It's quite amazing that you would put that much effort into being against them simply because they insulted you. Whereas the people now that I still listen to and that I still have respect for, they are going for the throat. They understand that this problem goes way beyond media and gaming. It's in everything. It's caused so many problems. And it's the world we find ourselves in. We're the counter-revolutionaries now. The apathetic people, they don't really care. They are literally essentially NPCs. They're just NPCs that will get really passionate if they're directly insulted. And maybe this is the problem. Maybe we need to be less insulting. Maybe we need to build bridges with them, because we know they can be reasonable. We thought they were reasonable half a decade ago. There's no reason to think that we can't have a cordial conversation with them. So maybe be open about that, and maybe if they're insulting to us, turn the other cheek. Be the bigger man. Just say, look, this is just a disagreement. There's no need to be insulting about it. And if they carry on, they're not worth your time. Just wipe your shoes, look into the arguments that they are making, address them, but you don't need to debate them. If they're not interested in talking to us, there's no reason to waste time trying to talk to them cordially. But this is the unfortunate place we find ourselves in. We are going to see even more of this stuff in gaming, in the media, because we are in the middle of the clown decade. Things are definitely going to get worse, unfortunately, but if there's any consolation, all we have to do is wait 6 or 7 years, and hopefully we will finally be winning. Because we are seeing more and more people in the mainstream, more and more normies, even more NPCs, in fact, who are getting fed up of this sort of thing. And they'll eventually want to put their money elsewhere. You know, Marvel's taking a tanking. People aren't watching Star Wars things anymore, despite the fact Andor's pretty good. People will find alternative ways to entertain themselves, and hey, the Generation Alpha, they aren't even watching TV anymore. You know, in Britain, we've lost a couple of our kids' channels because kids aren't watching TV. They're entertaining themselves with alternative media on YouTube, so we've got to fill that hole any way we can. And not in a cringe way like Stephen Crowder did with Biden farts, but all we have to do is just make things with no social justice stuff in. And that doesn't mean don't have any black people, don't have any gay people, don't have any women that can't hold themselves in a fight against a man, because if you've got weapons, it is pretty much equal footing. I mean, come on, we all loved Ellen Ripley. But do make sure what you are making makes sense, because I think all that everyone that watches my channel wants is for media that makes sense, isn't preachy about anything in particular, and if it has something to say, have the plot make sense, and have the theme reflected in the plot, in the characters, in whatever you're making. And if you can't make it make sense, redraft the damn thing before you make it properly. And if you still can't make it make sense, well, maybe your theme is anti-reality, or you just have absolutely no talent whatsoever. It's kind of hard to tell with people like Dave Filoni. But anyway, that's everything I had for you today. I'm sorry that it is quite a depressing video here. I usually try and keep it white-pilled on Fridays, but hey, when my feed has been absolutely filled with these people who I used to have respect for, I've got to address it. I have to talk about it. But I will try and find more white-pilling things to make videos on for next week. In the meantime, that's everything I had for you today. So, once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.